This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. A lot has happened within the last couple of weeks. A lot has happened between the last time I had Jake on to talk about the draft. Jake, welcome back. You know, we played a elaborate game, I think a week-long game of phone tag, basically, to be able to set this up this week. So happy to finally have these things line up so we can finally get on and talk about a couple of the moves the Browns made. One of the moves, Rodney McLeod, he's really fallen under the radar, right? A guy who kind of just signed in the middle of the offseason period. Well, tell me more about him. I know his PFF grades are pretty impressive.
Yeah, he came into the league. I think he came in as a UDFA and tried to really find his way around the NFL for a while. And when the place that he ended up ultimately figuring it out was with Jim Schwartz, right? So, you know, what he can do is at his age, a little accelerated in age, but that's okay. I mean, he's one of those fine wine types who just beats people to positions, but came in with LA, broke in with them, and then gets to Philly in 2016 after finally really seeing some time late in his LA arrival. Diverse position usage, man. Like his career, if you go back and trace it, he's aligned mostly at free safety early in his career. That has evolved. So, you know, a guy like him, not and again, not overly athletic, but just very cerebral about his approach. So, like, if you go back and retrace, most of the single high stuff was with Philly. Ironically, he gets with Schwartz in 2016 and 17. He's his free safety, but he got hurt early in the Super Bowl season, but then came back and played bigger roles for Schwartz in the years after that. But it kind of stinks for him a little bit. I'm sure. I mean, he still got that Super Bowl ring. That's not going anywhere. But the years that the single year that he didn't have much production in terms of because of an injury was was due to that. I think he had a lower body injury. I think he had a knee injury that season. But nonetheless, like, he's performed pretty damn well across his career, man. Has played 6,546 free safety snaps, so he's used to playing in deep portions of the field. What I'm encouraged about most, checking out some of his Colts tape from last year, because he stuck with Philly from 2016 to 21. He went to the Colts last year as they used him in a bunch of different spots. He had 527 snaps inside the tackle box. He had 290 at free safety, so they didn't use him as a deep player as much. So, like, if they're looking to fill that sort of dime backer role to play close, or use him in a way that Schwartz is more used to, play him deep and let Grant Delpit come up and do some different things, or Thornhill rotate up. The moral of the story is he creates comfort in using the other two guys creatively. I think that Grant coming up, playing some slot coverage and coming up, walking up, fitting the run is probably the best fit for him on occasion. But Rodney's just, you couldn't do better as a third safety for a single season. Like, 33 years old, has seen so much that he can teach these guys about in terms of both phases, right? And deep coverage and how to anticipate and all of that stuff. So it hasn't been talked about enough. I really haven't dug into it enough on my pod either, but it is going from Ronnie Harrison to this. Ronnie Harrison, sorry, not Ronnie. That'd be a big upgrade, wouldn't it? Going from Ronnie to this is a significant off the field, on the field preparation, long-term help for these two guys they have in the locker room now. Even a guy like Thornhill has won 2 Super Bowls. He can learn a lot from McLeod just by sheer exposure to the NFL. So I think it's just a home run get, and it'll allow Schwartz to feel comfortable with who's back there in that safety group, to get aggressive with his corners.
You know, there's always that guy that, like, a coach brings in who he has a good amount of experience and kind of trust to kind of be his guy on that side of the ball. It feels like that's kind of Jim Schwartz's, I need to get my guy kind of move here, right? Where you're going to
Yep.
go for guys who are talented, but you always want to be able to have your guy. And that's one of the things, since Joe Woods didn't really have that much time in the NFL as a defensive coordinator. You didn't really have that with Joe Woods, where like, who was Joe Woods' guy on that defense? I don't really think there was anybody in that locker room that was advocating for Joe Woods' vision. And that's important, right? Like when guys are having issues with what they're being asked to do, or not really understanding what the coordinator wants to get out of them, they're going to voice those frustrations to their peers before they voice any of those frustrations to the coaching staff. And there has to be somebody in there that's like, hey, look, I understand where you're at. I used to be where you're at. But this is what he wants to do. This is what he sees you as. Like, look at these guys that's been in this defense. You know, this is who you could be here. So don't get too discouraged when it comes to that. And that's something that's pretty important to have, like underrated. Because whenever we talk about locker room ability, I think I was talking about this with somebody, I forget who, but guys like Miles can only be the leader on so much because they're not really accessible. Like Miles can't really give you tips because he's Myles Garrett. Like stuff he's doing, like him taking a step somewhere and just like suggesting that is much more difficult for Isaiah McGuire to just do than what Myles Garrett can just naturally do. So you need these guys who can lead, but they're accessible. That's why the leaders are usually like Anthony Walker, right? They're probably looking for Dalvin Tomlinson to be somebody like that, right? The more accessible, like really good players, but accessibly good, like not super talented. Oh my God, they just do stuff differently than everybody else. Kind of guys. Like I think that's another factor in there when it comes to the leadership in that room.
It's hard for the superhumans to explain how they're superhuman, right? They just have that element is just hey, Miles says, I don't know, man. I'm 275, 280, and I can bend the corner like a ballerina. Like, just do what I do. Like, that's not easy, man. That's not a thing. So,
just simply run around him.
Yeah, just run the arc, man. But stay low and have ankle flexibility of the 1% of the 1%. So, yeah, you're right.
It's like
that's
you're not
point.
Really aware of that too when you're that guy, right? Because like you've been doing this stuff since grade school at that level, with this level of ability. To you, it's just taking a step. To them, it's like, dog, how do you do that? Like, so, you know, and I think it's important for there to be like kind of an everyman somewhere on the roster to be kind of helpful in leadership. And I think they really did attack that on both sides of the ball. They brought in Zadarius Smith. I mean, we know that this is a good move when you look at it on paper. The pressure numbers for him, especially, kind of just absolutely dwarf even Clowney in 2021. I think Clowney that year, he had 29 pressures. You look at Zadarius last year, he was up to, well, I think Pro Football Focus almost had him at like 70 or was it?
He had 80.
It was up there.
80. He had 55 in the first 10 weeks. And 10, I think 9 sacks in the first 10 weeks. So he was on fire. Now he had 25 pressures the rest of the season, which is still good for like top 20 in edge pressures. So people are like, why'd he fall off a cliff? Well, the cliff he was on was like Mount St. Helens. Like this guy was like unbelievable. If he doubled that, he'd have had a like record-setting season. He'd have had like 125, 130 pressures and 20 sacks. That'd been insane. So yeah, he still put together a nice run. But you're talking about Rodney McLeod from an accessibility standpoint. I'm somebody like Isaiah McGuire. I'm taking pick 126. I'm looking at Zadarius, and he's selected 122 in 2015. I think is when that might be a little too early. Yeah, no, 2015. So I'm asking him, man, like you came from a small SEC school in Kentucky, football wise, small, similar to myself in Missouri. Like, how do I get where you are? Show me what you've done. Right. That's the element that can help a lot of those guys. Cause you're right. And I think it's worth noting with some of these guys who are the superhumans taken in the high first round, like, yeah, I mean, I can ask Miles for things here and there, but he does things that the common man at the position can't do. So I can only take that so far. But asking a guy like Zadarius or Walk or some of these others who are finding longer NFL careers, what are you doing? How are you getting there? What do I need? How do I need not just the football field? How do I eat? How do I what did you do? How did you do your recovery? How did those things for guys who are not the absolute top 1% of 1% that gets selected early. Like I'm trying to pick their brain. So I know that Zadarius has been labeled this Clowney 2.0 issue. All of a sudden we've seen. I know we're going to talk about that, but I don't get that vibe, man. I think he's going to be good for some of these youngsters like Isaiah Wright and Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire. I think he could really help them and provide them a path, like show him how he went about early in his career, because he didn't hit the ground running with amazing stuff. Like his rookie year, he had 17 pressures. Like it took him a little while to build up to that 61 pressure, 10 sack season in Baltimore's last year before he parlayed that into a nice contract over in Green Bay. So, I'm again, like that's what the Browns are wanting is Wright and McGuire, these two youngsters they've taken 2 straight drafts to get on a path like that. So by the end of their rookie contract, they're contributors in a serious way. They're not expecting them to be huge the first year, but they want to get exposure to these guys they have at the top end of the group. And Okoronkwo in a similar fashion, right? They can help these guys and show paths. And I think they have such a better balance of those veterans this year, Quincy.
Yeah, and it's like people forget he was the other guy at Kentucky, right, at edge, because it was all about Bud Dupree. Like the hype on Bud Dupree was pretty good that year when Pittsburgh took him, and Zadarius was the guy opposite of him, not really a big deal at that time, and then kind of like scrapped his way into that higher status in the NFL, and actually is kind of you're more excited about having Zadarius than you are about having Bud Dupree at this point. He's really worked his way up into a career, and it's interesting that Clowney, you can get how that reputation can get there because we've had the personal experience with him, and then he's the number 1 overall pick who's kind of underachieved. How people are calling a guy who's consistently overachieved Zadarius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what frustrated people about Jadeveon Clowney, right? Like, I don't know why so many people were so quick to go, oh, this is just Clowney 2.0. One, no, the sack numbers don't look like Clowney sack numbers. The pressure numbers don't look like Clowney sack numbers. And 2, I mean, I don't remember Clowney ever being a team captain. And people don't really glow about Clowney like they have talked about Zadarius Smith. The only thing they have in common is that they wear the same face mask and they have dreadlocks. Like that's really it. They're 2 completely different players. So the comp to them, I don't know. Maybe it's some people just being lazy. Or maybe it's just maybe he doesn't have great relationships with certain operations peoples in organizations. Maybe that's it, but it doesn't seem like that problem's anywhere with his coaches or with his teammates.
No, I don't think so. I think he wanted singular thing I've noticed out of him. His issue is that he wants to get paid. Like he is putting up serious production seasons and he wants to be paid accordingly. Like he had to earn a lot of what the Vikings were going to give him last year. And coming into this season, he didn't have a guaranteed number he thought was fair. He wanted to reshape that contract. I will never be mad about guys trying to get their money in the NFL. With how short this is and your career could be over the next week, like money is money. The issue with Clowney was rooted more in opportunity. He would put on-field play, his role on the field, as a means to get his next job. He would sacrifice that season. That's not what Smith has ever done. Like, yeah, he in the offseason, sometimes he is arguing about his contract and trying to figure out how he gets paid, but he has never carried that into a season, and he's never been an in-season issue, and guys have loved him where he's been. So there's a fundamental difference in how Clowney has gone about things, and especially last year when things didn't go the way he wanted them to go. I would be surprised, considering how the Browns took care of Smith this year with the money side of things and giving him the guarantees for that singular year. Like, I would be surprised if that's the route this turned into. And I feel like he's got a decent chance to age pretty well as a defensive player, like a Justin Houston type, right? I think he's going to age pretty well. So I don't know that a lot of people are kind of highlighting this as the end of the relationship with him after a single year. And I'm like, I think they could run it back a couple more times if he's productive in the way that we expect him to be productive. Like, he's gonna. I mean, in a perfect world here, the Browns are going to win plenty of ball games. He's going to be around good football and is going to want to eat here. So I think that there's a chance he keeps going. But yeah, like his difference, his approach, and what has caused people issues with him have largely just been about him trying to get the best contract he can get. And when he's like, look at it, he had one season where he missed this the entire year with the back surgery, but other than that, like ridiculous production. This guy is putting up, like, pay him. He should be paid. Like if he's producing the way he's producing, he should be paid. So I understand where he's coming from, and I think that's just such an unfair label to throw on him, as happened late this week here. It really bothered me the way that was thrown out there.
Yeah, and it was just kind of thrown out there so casually, and like, I don't know, I feel like we just kind of do it sometimes to a player where we just say things about them and don't ever really check if these things are actually true about them, or do our due diligence to figure out if they're true, because there's certain people in the media that just run with a negative narrative on somebody. And that was one of those that struck me. It was like he just kind of threw it out there, and then it started being talked about as if it was a fact. And then you saw the cascade effect, right? The people who wanted to be against it for whatever reason started to make it sound worse and worse and worse. And then I got to a point to where I'm seeing people talk about it like, oh, well, you know, you just play with fire when you get a guy like Zadarius Smith. And it's like he committed a crime. It's like, what did he do? What did he do in the locker room that made him such a malcontent? Like, I can point to what Clowney did in the locker. He literally told people he wasn't playing at certain times on the field, and then told Mary Kay that at the end of the season.
Yeah, openly discussed it before the season was over. There were games to still be played.
Yeah, verified locker room issue. Like, that's verified. You can earn that reputation for Clowney. For Zadarius, where is the evidence? Like, what are we talking about here? You know, maybe he is, but I don't think we have sufficient enough evidence to even come forward with that kind of a charge. And it just kind of bugs me whenever we just lazily slap that label onto somebody, because that does real damage to somebody's career in the long run too, when we just kind of throw these things on them. But yeah, that Zadarius Smith, I thought that was a great trade. And I really didn't care for some of the stuff that came out afterwards. Also, you know, even if he was a little bit, you know, sour about last year, like, I don't think people understand. Like, when you stink on offense, you're not out there that much, right? You're going 3 and out, whatever it is. Okay, whatever. It's kind of easy to not be that mad. Like, you're frustrated for sure because you're not succeeding. But you out there and you stink on defense like the Vikings did? That sucks. Like, you're out there for 8 minutes getting beat up, you know, and then in the situation the Vikings were in, it was like, oh yeah, we can get them 3rd and 18, and then the secondary just implodes on these 3rd and longs consistently. And that's just frustrating. Everybody's going to be mad when you stink in that way on defense. And you look at the Browns, like, people were just mad last year because it's you can't be bad on defense in that way and just expect everybody to be all happy about it, because that is a painful thing to be horrible at. You know. Yep. But let's move to the offensive side of the ball real quick. It's been interesting. You know, if you talk to some people, they're like, yeah, the Browns, they should be probably one of the better offenses in the NFL. You talk to some other people and they're not sure if Deshaun Watson is better than Kenny Pickett. There's just a wild variance on what people think of this offense. I kind of relate it to a baseball lineup, right? And I think the Browns last year were kind of like a team like the Guardians were last year, where it's like, hey, they can get on base, they can hit singles, doubles, and they'll score, but it's going to take forever to get 2 points, you know what I mean, to get 2 runs. This year, I think they put more of an emphasis on, hey, let's get some home run hitters, right? That's what Elijah Moore is here for. That's what Marquise Goodwin is here for in part. And they want to get some more home run hitters to add into the rotation there. Do you think that they did enough there at wide receiver in order to kind of make it so that we're not relying on, hey, we got to keep it under 30. We know that we only have so many drives that we can score because it takes us so long. Yeah,
I did an entire podcast on this the other day, looking at, you know, most of the fixes, the exciting elements that they've brought to this team, safety edge among defensive tackle, have been on that side. Now, they did go out and acquire a couple pieces on offense I think will help, and Jordan Akins, a tight end, and obviously you mentioned Elijah Moore, and now drafting Cedric Tillman. The short answer to this, Quincy, is it all comes down to Watson. Like the whole thing, and I think that's like a crutch answer, but how they're able to incorporate offensively. Put it this way, to answer your question, that they have enough talent, in my opinion. Could they have another explosive playmaker? Maybe, sure. I don't know. Yeah, like they could, but I think there's enough talent there to be a really good offense if you put the Browns wide receiver group and even David Njoku alongside Travis Kelce. Like there's enough talent. They have to evolve what they do schematically. Like I've been saying it since week 15, week 14, and I've written about it. I just wrote up some stuff today at the OBR's website about Nick Chubb and how he fits into more shotgun running and success he's had at various points in his career using it. They have a massive need to work away from what they have known, the wide zone stuff. They can still have it. It's still there, but they need to be so much more layered and nuanced because what they ran into last year and what they've run into at various points in Kevin's tenure is this offensive structure is being exposed by so many teams in the past 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. Defenses have evolved. They know how to defend it better than ever. And the Browns at times, and I know you guys would agree with this, there were times where they just didn't have answers. They did not have answers to what defenses were doing to them. Teams had a feel for what they were running on a pretty consistent basis. And, long story short, they just didn't have enough playbook layers to keep defenses confused and on their heels and putting them in an aggressive position instead of reactionary. So I am of the belief that they need to revamp their approach, add elements of things that they have not done before, consistently using RPOs, more tight zone, the layers of things you can do off of tight zone, read option. It's really zone option. You can do power option. You can do a whole bunch of different things for your quarterback and throwing wrinkles off of it. They need to, like I said, get out of situations where they're predictable in terms of schematic usage. If they're in the gun last year, there was a lot of pin pull. They didn't really run anything tight, north, south, downhill, how they use play action off of their gun stuff. And then, like I said, you can still run your under center, wide zone, tight zone, variations in their power counter stuff with their two dominant guards that they like to do, but you just have to have more answers. And I think that, Deshaun talked earlier this offseason about how there were things that they were doing, and they came out in that Texans game hot and heavy with RPO stuff, like not just first level RPO stuff, but second and third level RPO stuff. And you could see them not be effective with it and then sort of reel it in and not use it much the rest of the year because probably too much, too fast for everybody. It's hard to hit the ground running with gigantic schematic differences from your earlier portions in the year. To do that in season is challenging. So again, I don't want to bore people with this because I feel like I've said it so many times, but they have to add, West Coast staples. There's air raid staples they can put in, and I think they will. There are things, like I've said, off of tight zone and RPO stuff that Jalen Hurts has been effective with that they need to put in because they have the personnel to do it. So the personnel question you asked, yes, I think they're in a position to be really successful with this stuff. It just depends how well Kevin and how well Deshaun sync up on what's best, how to apply it, and getting more out of Deshaun. People are leaning way too far into a 6-game sample size off of a year and a half away from football with all of the different mental stuff that Deshaun put on himself in a lot of ways. That situation is over now, though. There's nothing that can be changed from the result of that thing from anybody's perspective. So for him to remove himself from it, he should be better. I'm not sitting here expecting him to go out and be a top 3 quarterback next year, but I think he can work himself back toward being a top 10 to being the guy that we've known in the NFL. And with that comes a lot more success for them on offense because he'll create for them. So it's about Stefanski going against the grain, learning things, adapting and applying things he has not done. Deshaun even said as much in a postseason press conference. I think Mary Kay Cabot was the one who asked him the question, and he answered it about our coaches are going to have to, I'm going to learn things. Our coaches are going to learn some things that they've not done before, and they're laying breadcrumbs, Quincy, about where they're going and why they're doing it. But we have to see it applied, and we have to see a willingness to be to evolve on that side before we can sit here and give them any sort of preconceived credit for it. They have to apply it and do it, but their jobs, the offense has to be good. They have to be good, and jobs are on the line with that this year. So they, the pressure is real. They have to be good. They have to be better, and I expect they should be. I'm not saying it'll look like going from like, Nebraska back in the day went from Frank Solich to Bill Callahan and went away from triple option to shotgun offense in Nebraska, and that was like the most jarring thing in the world for Nebraska fans. Has been all downhill since, but I'm not saying it's that kind of difference of offense, but I think that you're going to see it. There should be different, and I'll try to point it out to people as best I can. They should look different and feel different, just from how they break tendencies of things that they've done, how they use the gun more often than not, and what wrinkles you can run off of a guy like Deshaun Watson and shotgun stuff. So yeah, that's the long-winded answer on that.
Yeah, and it's also important that, hey, look, if you have a game where it ain't working, that it doesn't just get scrapped the next game, right? Then you just revert to what you're doing, right? Because that happens a lot where teams, they're going to make this change and it doesn't work for a game, and all of a sudden we're just going to run the same stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they gotta have the confidence to stick with these adjustments, to trust these adjustments and everything else, and to trust in Deshaun Watson, right? You bring him in, you pay him the money, you want to put him in position to succeed. You have to trust what he's saying is going to put him in position to succeed, even if it doesn't look like it's going to succeed immediately. You got to stick with it, and that's going to be something new for people, and it's going to be something to prepare to. Let's talk about the running back position. This has been an interesting debate all summer. Like, some people are acting as if like the Browns aren't going to carry any running backs, right? Remember that portion of the offseason where it's like, we're not even running the ball. Why have Nick Chubb, right? Now we're talking about bringing in Ezekiel Elliott. The tables turn all the time in this conversation. I'm of the opinion that I don't think Nick Chubb's carries are going to be that much affected, because I think he's just going to take a higher yield of the carries. Like, there's going to be less carries overall. Deshaun's probably going to be your number two leading rusher, or number two leading rusher in attempts, probably. And you're probably going to have Nick Chubb taking, I would say, what he usually gets 65 to 70% of the carries. He's probably going to go close to 80 this year.
Yep.
So if we're talking about a backup running back in that type of situation, I don't see why not go with Jerome Ford. I mean, like, the Chiefs felt fine going with Pacheco as a rookie, as a backup there, and eventually gave him the starting gig, based off of performance. I know Jerome Ford hasn't played a lot, but like, we got to give him the opportunity to play before we replace him with anybody. Doesn't make sense to get anybody like Zeke. And I heard the big argument was like, what if Nick Chubb gets hurt? Well, you do what every other team does. Who's on the street available? You know what I mean?
Yeah, at that point, it would be that. Yeah, Jerome Ford should get a chance. I mean, he's buried behind. They were paying Kareem Hunt top 15 running back money last year. They were going to use him. Like, if they weren't going to let him go, they were going to use him. So they used him, and he was behind sort of Dearness Johnson, who they decided to keep around too. I don't know if they ended up regretting that, but like, with these positions, especially running back and the volume at which they work, like, it's never bad to have depth there. So I understood why they did it, but it didn't ultimately pan out where you got to develop some of these guys. And that's not Ford's fault. I think he only had 8 carries for like 12 yards. There's a couple nice runs mixed in that. The preseasons where he shined, you could see it. Like, you could see he needs reps, he needs exposure, but when he makes a decisive cut, he's a pretty good pad level runner. He can burst. Like, what you want to see from rookies who are not in a position to play early, which is not the end of the world. If they're not in position to play early, or mine or Nick didn't play, and now that was largely laughable when we look back on it, but he didn't play until like week 10 when they strong arm.
What was his name?
Carlos Hyde back in the day, man.
He was Carlos Hyde, and whoever
strong
was
armed him into
kicks.
being traded. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like, it's not. I guess what we have a tendency to do is, if a rookie doesn't play much, like, we just write him off. If they drafted Jerome Ford this year, we'd be pretty excited about like what his tape shows. So what you're looking for with these young guys are flashes. And when he got an opportunity to return kicks, which is a vision thing, right? Speed, vision, explosiveness, position, he was promising, and he had a nice run returning kicks from week 10 on. I think he had like 4 or 5. I think he had 5 actually returns over 30 yards. So some really strong stuff in that phase. You can see it. Like, I don't really, with running backs, you just see it. When you see it, you know, like they have a way about them where you can tell that they don't, the first or second guy doesn't always bring them down. They're able to decisively make a cut, get skinny, and find a tough path in between NFL offensive tackles or rough. So like, I just think he's got enough burst. I think he's got enough comfort in catching the football in space either out of the backfield or out of empty sets where they motion him out. I posted an article, ironically, I feel like we're talking about all these things I wrote or talked about, but I just posted something last night about Jerome and some of the highlights, things that I like about what he's done on a football field, both at Cincinnati, which is not far removed at all, and what he did in his preseason and ultimately his rookie year as well. So yeah, he deserves a chance. He's got enough burst as a back. He can run, he can move. He's got tight zone experience from Cincinnati, so that's an element to this offense this year. I think he'll be comfortable running, and I'm looking forward to him getting an opportunity because he's a good athlete, and I think he looked comfortable at times doing what they were asking him to do, and he can move, and he's a bigger build. Like, he's not a big guy, but he's thick enough to handle getting hit in the NFL and running those, or inside zone concepts. So I think that we have sort of slept on him a little bit too much. When the draft was a loaded running back draft and free agency, they haven't done anything. It's probably telling us that they like him more than we maybe have perceived that they like him, because we think when a guy doesn't play his rookie year, he's an outlier, he doesn't belong anymore, and that's not the case.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what's going to go on there with Jerome Ford, because again, didn't really get much opportunity to play. I know the ideal Zeke Elliott is great, but like, I don't think that's just where this team is going in that direction. It doesn't really make sense. No problem. You have a great day. Everybody else, have a good night, and see y'all later.